Each Rotary districts that are part of the program send about 300 young people to other countries and accept 300 young people from other countries in return. The goal of the Rotary Youth Exchange is to promote advancement of international understanding, goodwill, and peace at the person-to-person level. And I'm looking for some club history here. I am aware that our club has sponsored at least 2 participants in the past, but I'm not sure if there have been others. So when you have a question about anything related to the history of the club, you go to Charlie McGill. Anything else besides that? Did you aware of Charlie? Okay. Very good. And lastly, of course, there's RYLA, Rotary Youth Leadership Awards, which involves thousands of young people worldwide every year. This was started in Queensland, Australia in 1959 and officially adopted by Rotary International in 1971. As we all know, the RYLA program enables young people to develop leadership and human relations skills while having fun and making friends. And our club has participated in RYLA for many years. Hopefully a little dip we had will change going forward. So when you look at all of this, it's pretty clear Rotary is making a major impact on youth around the world. Rotary Minute.
And a quick note on our RYLA sponsorship. As you know, we had 3 RYLA participants this year, so that was a real improvement over, was it 0 the year before? Yeah, so maybe we're back on track, because once someone participates, then they can tell the next class of students about the great experience they had, and it keeps the whole thing rolling forward. There'll be a little item in today's paper about our RYLA participants this year. And there's now a story on the website too. Thanks for writing that, Elizabeth. So now our inspiration is from Angela.
Good morning, everyone. And it is funny talking to a door. That's what I see. And Leslie, hi. So I was really happy when Susan asked me to provide the inspiration this morning, because I had a great experience this week or last week with finding inspiration just kind of unexpectedly after a conversation with an educator friend. We were talking about the role of schools in helping young people become who they truly are, which was a lovely conversation all by itself, and one that I would encourage all of us to think about. But then a couple days later, I was reading the New York Times, and the New York Times magazine this weekend, or last week, profiled a person named Alok Vaid-Menon, who some may have heard of or seen. They are a trans non-binary activist. And I'm just going to read a couple of quotes from the profile. It's a Q&A. First of all, Alok names as a really foundational experience in their life something from an event from 2016, where they had just delivered a keynote speech at an event in Melbourne, Australia, and they were walking out of the event feeling really great, really good about themselves, and they got onto a tram and were punched in the face. A guy punched Alok in the face, and they noticed they developed a fear of going outside, which of course is a really difficult fear to have, among many others. So Alok has written a book called Beyond the Gender Binary, in which, and this is a question from the interviewer, in your book, Beyond the Gender Binary, you write, quote, "There is a shocking disconnect between the way the government and the media speak about gender nonconforming people and the reality of our lives." So this is, again, the interviewer saying, tell me more about that disconnect. And Alok's answer is this: there are no such thing as trans issues. There are issues that non-trans people have with themselves that they're taking out on trans people. A great example is when they talk about our quote agenda, the transgender agenda. It's recruiting people. My agenda is the ability to exist in public without the fear of being physically assaulted. If my existence is such a profound threat to the social fabric, then what needs to be interrogated is how we created a world that doesn't allow people to exist. What's interesting about so much anti-trans rhetoric is that they say, you're playing pretend. And we're saying we were playing pretend when we pretended to be men and women and straight. People only understand us through polarities. That doesn't map into the ordinary fleshy experience of being trans, where I don't even think about my gender most of the time. I'm thinking about basic things like what I'm going to eat for lunch, one of humanity's greatest existential questions. And then another, vis-a-vis the conversation I was having about schools and their role in helping youth become who they truly are. One of the follow-up questions that the interviewer asked was, I think a lot of people in every walk of life have a sense that there is a true self inside them that they want to express that instead gets boxed in or dictated by other people's expectations. Do you have advice for people who might feel that way about how to be their true selves? And this is Alok's answer. I think you're pointing to exactly what's behind all the anti-trans sentiment. The fundamental root of our problems is people living versions of who they've been told they should be, not who they are. It's because in their own homes, they were made to believe that they had to emulate some pre-existing standards in order to have access to love. But I believe every one of us is worthy of love simply for being. The resentment and bitterness that people have toward me and my community, and when I say my community, I don't just mean trans people, I mean people living their own lives, is because they're looking at us saying, what do you mean that we get to be free? People use their suffering as an emblem of their worth. I had to clip my wings, so you must too. I'll skip a little bit here, but then the thing I want to end on is Alok saying, I began to realize that 99.9% of other people's reactions had nothing to do with me and had everything to do with their own self-imposed prisons. Your role on this earth is to cultivate the truest form of yourself, and other people are going to feel threatened by that because they're living in an abbreviated version of their own joy. And I guess I would add to that, this is me, Angela. If your role on earth is to cultivate the truest form of yourself, and if every one of us saw that as our role, or at least one of our roles on earth and our time here on earth, then you can imagine everybody living who they truly are and becoming a whole lot more free. If what you're really focused on is becoming the truest version of yourself, it's not going to matter how other people choose to express themselves in ways, especially when it comes to things like gender and identity. How could that possibly matter if all you're worried about is becoming the truest form of yourself? So I just want to let us think about that, and especially in light of the many attacks on identity that we're seeing in schools and even in our own community. Doesn't feel like an inspiration to end on a down note, but so I'll just make a gesture. I think we can all do
Thank you.
better.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. Given us a lot to think about with that. Thank you. All right, just a few quick announcements and then we'll move to our speaker. First off, next Thursday, Ted, I believe we're having Senator Peter Welch join us.
He says so.
Unless something comes up. So, okay, we'll have a plan B just in case. I was curious, trying to figure out how many folks think that they'll be here next week. We also will be having an alternate breakfast situation. So I just want to help with planning. Raise hands. So almost everybody. All right. Thank you. I'm considering whether to expand our audience a little bit by maybe inviting the South Burlington Club to join us. But we can talk about how that might work. Great. All right. And then I had mentioned a couple surveys that you'll receive last week, and the social media survey, I'll send the link to you today. And then in a few days, I'll send you the link for the one regarding singing and pledging. So be on the lookout for those, and I'll appreciate you just kind of jumping on and doing them right away so that you don't forget to fill them out. And then last announcement, I think Sherry wanted to speak briefly about the fair.
Thank you to everybody who has signed up so far. So we're doing the 28th, 10 to 4, right? So we do have 15 people. There's not room, and that includes a couple split shifts. There's not room for more than 15, but that doesn't mean we can't take a couple other people as alternates possibly, because I see between now and the 28th, things can happen. And then also it could give us an opportunity to maybe split a couple shifts. If other people want to sign up, then we could make it so that some people don't have to necessarily be there the full 6 hours. So feel free, if you think you have either 10 to 1 or 1 to 4, that you could jump in and sign up. That'd be awesome. But otherwise, thanks. So many people have signed up. I don't know if the evening thing is going to take off, but I think it, as individuals, it could, because say like Aaron volunteered for an evening. I reached out to the contact and he said we can actually have Aaron just join another group, because there are groups that don't have a full 12 or 15 people, and we can receive her $100 would come to us. So if it'll be harder to do the split shift thing. So if you think you can do a night split shift, just try to find somebody that can do the other half of whatever you can't do to make it a full shift. So that, just to simplify the math, that'd be great. Thank you. 4 to 10. Yep. And that's the full shift. So if you need to split it with somebody, then like I think you had just mentioned you could do the second half.
7 to 10.
The 7 to 10. So if somebody can do 4 to 10, then try to pair up with 4 to 7, sorry, pair up with Dan. It'd be great. Thanks. It's all good. It's income for our club. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. So our guest speaker is Williston Chief of the Fire Department, Aaron Collette. And I'll want to introduce him properly. But before I do that, I wanted to mention that the fire departments have always been important in my life. First of all, when I was a kid, I woke up with a firefighter in my bedroom when I was in 7th grade because we had a chimney fire. It was Richmond Volunteer Fire Department. It was one of the Levesques. And my parents had forgotten to wake me up because there were 8 kids and, it's hard to keep track. But it wasn't, the fire wasn't in the house, so it wasn't that big a deal. The other thing is that now my wife, Lucy, and I are watching at night, almost every night, the 1970s series Emergency Squad 51. I don't know if any remember that. But that has been instrumental in our marriage, frankly, because it comes on at 10 o'clock and that's right after the Yankees are generally done playing. And with as poorly as they're doing this year, Lucy needs some downtime before we go to bed. So I'll ask her over and over again. So is that accurate? Would they start an IV with D5W, Ringer's lactate, and all this other stuff that they do on the show? And it helps out quite a bit. So anyway, those are my that's my contact with the fire departments. But on a more serious note, though, Williston is a really interesting place to live for a lot of reasons. One of the interesting parts of it is the government. We have a population of 10,000 people at night, but we have over 20,000 people here during the day. So we need fire, rescue, police, public services for 20,000 people. And so that is a hard thing to balance. We are incredibly lucky to have Aaron Collette as our chief. He has a huge experience, and his job with the fire department in Williston has been just outstanding. The development of the fire department into a full professional operation was critically needed and is being accomplished. Aaron is the chief of our fire department. He's also a rescue team manager for the Vermont Urban Search and Rescue, where he's been very busy with the floods recently. So we're really honored to have him here, given what he's been through recently. He's a lead fire instructor with the Vermont Fire Academy. And we stole him from the Burlington Fire Department, where he was deputy chief of operations for 7 years and deputy chief of administration before that, and a battalion chief before that. So it is with great gratitude that I present to you Aaron Collette.
So I wasn't 100% sure what to share with you, but I thought it was only timely that we talk a little bit about the flood, and then I want to incorporate what happens here locally here at Williston Fire and what that means. So Vince has the presentation we'll share, and hopefully our friends on Zoom can see it as well. But essentially, technical rescue is where I wanted to start this conversation. And that, if you just go to the next slide for me, Vince. So these are some of the technical rescue disciplines. There's a document that exists in the fire service world, NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Association, and they developed the standards for performance essentially for fire departments and rescue situations. And in their document 1006, these are some of the disciplines. I didn't include the cave rescue or the surf rescue, because you could see it probably didn't have applicable value here in the conversation today. But what I've done here is highlighted in green the capabilities that we've kind of established in my 2.5 years here at Williston as the baseline for performance, and we're going to set some goals here to go beyond that. But rope rescue being the foundation of it all, really is that pretty much everything that we do comes back to rope rescue. And you think like, well, how does that work? And I'll show you that as it comes full circle to an event in the flood that was a high stress event. The rest of the items here, confined space rescue. Now we have a liability here in the community that we work collaboratively, not only because we don't have all the resources here, right? It would be impractical for us to have all the resources to handle all of this. So we have partners throughout the state and in the county. So for confined space rescue, heavy vehicle rescue, animal technical rescue, wilderness search and rescue, trench rescue, structural collapse rescue, we have a tiered system here where we would partner with the Burlington Fire Department, the South Burlington Fire Department, and later on I'll talk about the Vermont Urban Search and Rescue Team, which Ted spoke of. But right now, we've established, when I first came into the department, as you can imagine, with the industrial liability here in the community, we didn't have a machinery rescue capability. So when I came through, we worked and partnered with a Home Depot, and they set us up for this. And then we went and sent members to technical rescue training for machinery rescue. And that's people with their, they get caught up in machinery. And we've actually done a handful of those rescues in the last 2 years, which would say, well, you know, they don't hit the media because of HIPAA. We don't share that stuff, but we've had some of those. And I'll bar you the grotesque part of it, but we've had some really great successes with that, with good patient outcomes. So that passenger vehicle rescue, that's the motor vehicle crashes we do very frequently here. And the other component that we've added since my tenure here is a full ice rescue capability, really supported by town management and the select board and the budget to allow that to happen, so we could buy the specialized suits and then sending those folks to training. So This is just a snapshot of what technical rescue looks like. If we could just have the next slide, please. So when our firefighters come out of the firefighter training, they get a firefighter level 1 certification. And in that certification, there is no baseline technical rescue training. It's awareness only with basic ropes and knots. When we send them to the next level, another 80 hours or so, they get firefighter level 2, and that's where they get their passenger vehicle extrication class, assisting special rescue teams, so they could help teams set up a basic 3-to-1 mechanical advantage rope system, which is a hauling system. Very basic level of training. So we have to invest in our people to go beyond that level of capability because our risk is too great. Next slide, please. These are the 3 tiers that are outlined in this NFPA 1006 document. So the awareness level is just so our people don't get in trouble, right? So as it applies to the flood environment is like, you recognize when water is moving and the dangers of that. And it's more often than not, it's just rendering aid by a throw bag or something of that sort, but it's not engaging. It's not getting our feet wet necessarily. It's not going and placing ourselves in that danger. The next level is an operational level, which allows them to perform rescues within a limited capacity. It's usually without great threat to harm or their own personal danger. And then the most advanced level is this technician level, operating at the highest level of certification, and really involves a great level of personal risk, both to the rescuer and often to the patient. So that's how this document spells out the levels of training. Next slide, please. So an example of this technician rescue skills, and this is going to come full circle here when I show you the photos later on, is this tension highline system for boat operation. So this is a situation, and this is us training at the Urban Search and Rescue Cache on dry land, right? Because you want to have that ahead of time before you engage in this. But this involves throwing a line across a river, or actually we use a line gun that's fired across to send a tracer line, and then we send 2 other lines, and we'll actually operate a boat in that swiftwater environment that's tensioned because the motor will never hold the boat, okay? We wouldn't be able to operate underneath this. And it's really a game of trust, and I'll explain a little bit more about that later on. Next slide. So the vision here for the department, that we're still working on our getting a strategic plan together, but at least at the very onset here is to make sure that all of our career staff are trained in the rope rescue operations level. We just this last week sent more of our folks down to the State Fire Academy where they were able to get that passenger vehicle rescue. We do that through the firefighter level 2 program, but then we augment that through in-service training here at the station. And then we also the ice roll water rescue class, we hold those in the winter, obviously, and we've done a fair share of getting all of our career staff up and trained to that level, and we continue to invest in that training as we go forward for new personnel. And then the machinery rescue, we're on our way to that. We haven't quite accomplished that goal. And this is just an example of a photo on the next slide of what happens in the firehouse. As you can imagine, things like rope rescue, they're very perishable skills. If you don't put your hands on rope, if you don't build some of these systems, they don't become familiar. And then when you're asked to perform that, you're like, oh man, what did that look like? How did I build that? It seemed so easy at the time, but in a high stress environment, it doesn't seem to be so easy. So the members here work to demonstrate that, and it probably occurs now on a quarterly basis, if not more frequently. Next slide. This is just an example. We're actually going to be doing this. This is a demonstration. We'll do this again tomorrow. We do this annually for some folks down at the VTC. They host a summer camp over at that campus, and we bring those youth through and we demonstrate the capabilities of vehicle extrication. We have great partnerships here in the community with Rick's Towing, with All Metals Recycling, and we have a lot of access to vehicles where other departments and even the State Fire Academy struggles to get vehicles in. They pay a lot of money for those vehicles. The State Fire Academy, I think, pays $250 per car. You can imagine how that stacks up when you're trying to do that. But our partnership with the local businesses really affords us great training opportunity. And I would say that our members have a great level of competency in this technical rescue discipline. The next slide shows just simple some of the advanced training opportunities. If we go to the next slide, how does this come back full circle, right? So the federal government provides grant opportunities, even for our state fire academy. They weren't eligible until about 5 years ago, where state agencies, training agencies couldn't actually get funding. So this, what you see here, these tools are an example of how that federal funding comes back full circle. So the federal government, through their Fire Act grant process, allowed the State Fire Academy, they applied for over $350,000 of equipment to train the firefighters of the state of Vermont. And these are rescue struts that, and I'll show you here. I think I have some photos of them in operation and what the value of these are. But these struts allow the members of the fire departments across the state to get their advanced training at the State Fire Academy. This is beyond what they would get in their Firefighter 2 certification. So now that the State Academy has this, they can pay it forward. And we have both of these systems here in Williston Fire. One is on engine 1, and the system on the right, the yellow system, is on engine 2. Next slide, please. And here's just an example of what these struts do. So if you have a vehicle that's roof resting and with persons trapped in it, these struts hold that vehicle from actually collapsing back down on the rescue. It allows you to take the vehicle roof off the top of the car and access in that. And you'd say, oh, what's our liability in Williston? Well, I'll say that honestly, we probably use these struts equal to or more frequently than we do the hydraulic rescue tools where we cut cars apart, because we have a lot of side resting vehicles or roof resting vehicles with the highway. And certainly some of the odd other intersections we have, it can be a low speed intersection where you could put a vehicle on its side. So our members are fluent in that. And then the past week, we've been sending our folks out to All Metals Recycling, and they've been working just on these type of scenarios. Next slide, please. This is an example of a real life incident that we responded mutual aid to. This is in Heinsberg. There was a person on this tractor that had the tractor had gone over, and they were trapped in here with their leg. And simply, I don't have the photos of it up, but what we did is put those two struts on the front of that tractor and lifted the tractor up to give enough space so we could remove that person's leg from that entrapment. So you'd think, you know, it's not always vehicle rescue, right? It's this farm machinery rescue that we have application in as well. We were able to get this person out, and the Heinsberg Fire Department did a great job working on it. There was Heinsberg, Shelburne, and Williston Fire all responded to this event. And South Burlington Fire had a paramedic there off duty who lived right next to the scene and rendered aid as well. This is another example of how you say this is an extreme, but if you're on social media, if you follow anything, this is a real potential for us. And this is what we've been training on the last week down at All Metals, is multi-vehicle stack and how you secure all of that. So this goes well beyond, right, the basic fire and EMS roles that we host every day. Next slide, please. So we also have some partnerships beyond the State Fire Academy, and that's with the State Urban Search and Rescue Team. And the next slide, please. What the State Urban Search and Rescue Team is, it's a 90-member team that is made up of people from all disciplines. And when I mean all disciplines, I'm talking engineers, veterinarians, business people, firefighters, EMS providers, who else out there, retirees. They run the gamut, right? But the cohesive nature of all of them is that the strengths of one complement the capabilities of the team, right? Is that we can't expect all of us to know everything. So this 90-member team is assembled with the idea that you'll ever have 30 people at any given time that could go out the door in what we would call a type 3 team, a structural collapse team. And what you probably don't know is that this very sophisticated training ground, and that's what it is, it looks like a dumping ground, but this is a sophisticated training ground that was actually brought to Chittenden County and lives over at Camp Johnson. Okay, so this is in the back of Camp Johnson in the secured facility. It was brought here under a grant for the Guard to train into this urban search and rescue environment. And so the nice thing about your urban search and rescue team for Vermont is that the base is in Colchester at the AOT garage in Colchester. And if you know where the AOT garage is and you know where Camp Johnson is, you realize that you could actually throw a softball almost across the fence to get over there. So they complement each other very well. And so we have this very sophisticated world-class facility sitting here in Chittenden County that a lot of folks don't know about. All of these systems that you see where you see the Connex boxes in the background, those are all welded and engineered. And so they were built by the Guard, and they have high point anchors and everything for rope rescue that can come off the top of them. So those have been there, and the state utilizes them. Next slide, please. Frequently, as well as the Guard. And that's this very fluid public and military partnership that we have out there. There's a credentialing process, there's security issues, but they're accustomed to seeing us now. They understand our badging, and as long as we're on the list to come through, we're able to get over there to do that training. Next slide. That comes full circle. You say, well, where does Vermont come into this? Well, this is a partnership. This is what we partnered up with Macedonia, and we hosted a delegation from Macedonia here in Chittenden County, where they came over to see, because they were trying to figure out in their government, how can they evolve urban search and rescue capability, because there's some political challenges, I think is probably the most politically correct way to say it, but between the public and the civilian side and the military side, how can they, and this is, the state wanted to showcase how we can actually involve the municipal with the federal or level of government. So these folks were here, and next slide will show that some of them were very unprepared to be out in this rubble pile situation, but it was a great opportunity for us to showcase the capability here at Vermont as well, to share this on a national level, international level. Next slide. The versatility of that pile, again, with the technical rescue theme, is that nothing is basic, nothing is simple. This is us vectoring a confined space rescue within that rubble pile. So what is built underneath all of that concrete are tunnels. And so the state urban search and rescue team has 3 live find canines. So those dogs work, and we have to train those dogs, and we'll hide people inside of that. And this is how we keep those dogs fresh, is that we'll hide people down in there, and those dogs will alert on us to tell us where people are trapped or entombed. So that is one of the credentialing processes that exists. And I'm not sure that anybody or a lot of folks in the state are aware that we have that capability. And the next slide just shows a continuation of that same rescue. So starting to ease into the flood. So how does this work? What happens is that you saw all the different technical rescue disciplines that are out there, and there was swiftwater and surface water and then floodwater rescue. The state has offered up the opportunity for Williston firefighters who are dual members of the urban search and rescue team to get this higher level of training. And it comes at no cost to Williston Fire, is that the state takes up the cost of the tuition and participation in this, and our members will either be issued training time off for it if it's an endorsed class, or will elect to take vacation time to attend this. This is a spring boat operators class that was hosted in Newfane, Vermont at through Rescue Inc. and a company called VEMSA. And they had one of the premier boat operator instructors in the nation teaching this class. So it's very humbling to see this very famous instructor and his group actually teaching that class. And this is an example of some of the resources that we had down through there. Next slide. So what exists within the state? The state has 3 of the boat setups that you see here with a tow vehicle, and there's 2 boats that sit on that trailer with motors, and then there's a bunch of support vehicles. A little bit of context: in when Irene came through in 2011, the state didn't have any of this. So the state started ramping this up through the initiative where we applied for grants through Homeland Security, asked for this level of service, and we said, you know, we caught ourselves unprepared in Irene. We don't want to be that way again. And we continue to work on this. In fact, there are motors that were issued through this year's Homeland Security grant that are still sitting in the crates waiting to be put together. So this is an evolving process. But the goal here was that the state is invested through the Homeland Security grant program with allocating 12 boats, 6 trailers, and 12 motors. So they're all the same. So if you have a problem with that, or if you're asking people to cross-pollinate across teams, that they're familiar with the equipment, it's the same level of equipment. And so you don't have to look at it and go, I've never run this motor. This is an Evinrude, and this is a Johnson or something else. This is a Tohatsu. No, they're all the same. So when our members get in there, boom, you're going to go with this level. So that's a project that continues today. Next slide. And then comes July 9th. So July 9th, July 7th, the Urban Search and Rescue team got a call from the town of Killington when they had the mudslide on Route 4. That came down, crossed over, it was unwitnessed, and they didn't know if any vehicles were trapped inside of it. So the rubble pile that you saw earlier when I spoke with the dogs, that was a special call out where form follows function, is that the dogs had to run that rubble pile on that landslide. And they ran that, and they worked with excavators and the dogs. It was at one point, I have a video of one of our dogs, one of the Urban Search and Rescue dogs, and their handler in the bucket of an excavator, because they couldn't get them across the flowing water. And that's how they moved them across the flowing water. So those dogs are trained to that level. I couldn't get any of my dogs to sit in an excavator bucket to go across. And so that was that call out. And then we have a great partnership with the National Weather Service. These folks know what our mission is. And Scott Whittier here, a Williston resident. Scott is a home run. Scott and I have a relationship from back at Burlington Fire, where we worked a lot on a lot of special projects. And when they called us here and said, this looks really bad, and I'm not sure that the local media got this out ahead of time with enough warning, but they said, this could be worse than Irene. And so we didn't mess around with it. The state said, all right, let's start getting our teams ramped up and stage them. And we knew we were undergunned in Irene. And so if you go to the next slide, this is what we have available in state today. So I told you that we didn't have a whole lot. So we've added some of these. So from the Urban Search and Rescue team divided 3 boat teams up to Springfield, Manchester, and Middlesex. And then all of these other fire departments are partner agencies that have water rescue capability. And so these are the folks that are also going to get some boats and stuff out of that Homeland Security project. Rescue Inc. is a private nonprofit down in Brattleboro area. They also have a station over in Newfane. So they had a couple of teams out there. And then the rest of the fire departments and Stowe Mountain Rescue were staged at different locations. And if I think you go to the next slide, actually, this is a little bit out of order, but remember that rope system I showed you the photo of earlier? We were sent down to Manchester, and when we went through Rutland, by the time we got to Rutland, it was really raining on Sunday evening. And I asked the group that I was assigned to. So in my role as a rescue team manager is I would manage our rescue group, which is about 12 people. And we are the people that understand how to get people out of bad situations. When we find them, when we look at that, analyze it, look at risk benefit, and then it will evolve our capability. So I said to the group, I said, hey, everybody good with this high line, tension high line? So we did this in the firehouse while it's pouring rain out on the evening of July 9th. The next slide shows where the state deployed the swiftwater rescue teams from in-state. So this is the GIS view of that. We work on a cloud-based platform called SARCOP, which is allows us to see real time what's going on out there in a GIS platform. It's the national model. It really comes back after some of the bigger hurricanes, where it allows us to look at any time. We can log right into this cloud-based platform and see the real life damage assessments or what's happening across the state. So this was before, as we had SARCOP up and running, but this was the morning of July 10 where the teams were. And this says 8 o'clock. So it's actually a little bit behind because the teams weren't there at 8 o'clock. They were in theater at 6 in the morning. We were starting to get emergency calls for rescues. Next slide shows us Vermont doesn't have the capability. At the national level, there exists this program called an Emergency Management Assistance Compact, or an EMAC request. Essentially, it says, we're looking for swiftwater rescue teams, and we'll type it. There's types 1 through 3, that's the level. So we're looking for type 1 swiftwater rescue teams, which is about a 16-person team, 2 boats, to help with our need. I'm not sure that this is complete, but this is what I knew. That we reached out to folks from North Carolina, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Michigan, Virginia, New Hampshire, and New York, as well as this white IST. North Carolina was one of the first teams contacted when we were operating on July 10 around 10 o'clock. North Carolina was driving into Vermont. So we had ordered North Carolina on Sunday the 9th, knowing that we were anticipating that we were going to be beat up. And this was amazing because we were overtaxed with the amount of rescues. And so they went right in theater, helping augment that. In retrospect, looking back, Vermont was one of the most active teams during Hurricane Florence. When Hurricane Florence hit, Vermont did over 40 rescues in 2 days down in Kelly, in Pender County, North Carolina. So it was like old home day, seeing some of the same familiar rescuers, same faces. So having them, because North Carolina was not getting hit, their state essentially released their team to come up and offer mutual aid assistance at of course, a cost. Connecticut, they were brought in on the 10th. I couldn't tell you what time they came in on the 10th, but obviously they're much quicker than Carolina to get here. But Connecticut, I'll share you a story here. You see some photos of us working with Connecticut as well. So Massachusetts Task Force 1 and New York Task Force 1 are complete urban search and rescue teams. They come with a convoy of tractor trailers and all of this. It was a big 90-person team. This is $1 million a day kind of team that's coming into the state. There were some bureaucratic holdups here. So Mass couldn't go engage because there was a signature that was missing on some paper. So we finally got the signature and then they went in theater. But when Mass or New York Task Force 1 deploys, you need a national IST. So the incident support team, the overhead team, the Fed will send those in to help manage that because they know that local resources can't manage this level. So the white IST, so they have different colors and each color team has a certain time frame that are when they're on their rotation. So the white IST who came in, to give you a little context, what does that mean? The member that I was working with was out of Seattle, Washington. So when white IST came in, they divided the state into 3 zones, south, middle, or south, central, and northern. And then they took all of the other teams, the state teams and these federal teams, and they deployed them on the 11th and 12th to those locations and started to really manage it at a high level because it far exceeded the capability of the state to do that Because by then we were probably operating on 4 hours of sleep in 72 hours period. What does that look like here? Next slide shows that, you know, Vermont has this in this Division of Fire Safety. In the next slide, you'll see this is one of the first situations we were presented with on the 10th. So we're operating in Londonderry, Vermont. We had literally pulled in to Londonderry. We're watching the water come up, and I'm sitting with the Londonderry Technical Rescue captain. I don't know their rank, I apologize, but there was a person who responsibility in the Londonderry Fire Department. And they're like, the dispatch tone went off, and this happened about 1,200 feet from us. So there's a gentleman stuck in that pickup truck. That is a 1,000-gallon propane tank that is relieving propane gas, and all of that cloud is the condensate from that propane gas. And you can see that this is our members operating in that. So when I tell you that it's the technician level and you're at great personal harm, this is as great as personal harm. You're surrounded by flammable gas, deploying that boat to get out to that member, out to that person who's stuck in that truck. Next slide. And so not a whole, this is a very simple rescue for us again, but it all comes back to rope rescue. Like I told you in the beginning, understanding how to tether that boat, have control of that boat. We put that person into a life vest and pull them quickly to shore. Next slide. We opened the door. We opened the door. Yeah. So
I know when my car was upside down in the water, I couldn't get the door open over the water.
Curiously enough, we had talked to him about that, but he had opened. I'm like, you know, sometimes you can't control that right there. It's fight or flight on that person that's trapped inside of there. He was concerned about his firearm. He wanted to bring his firearm. He had a long shotgun. I'm not even kidding. He had a long shotgun with him, and he's like, I want to. And we're like, listen, you can come back and get it when the water recedes. That's not what we're doing. Next slide. If you know Londonderry, Vermont at all, you know there's a bridge that goes down before that Jelly's Market. And so all of that became an island. And I'm not sure that I have a photo of the bridge, that if I just wanted to try to keep a little bit short. But essentially we had about a dozen homes to evacuate. We were doing that through the water as the water was rising. It was getting deeper and deeper as we were there. So we pulled all those people out, got them up onto high ground. And this is just an example. They wouldn't leave without their pets, right? And sure enough, so we had to do some pet rescues in there. The person that was in this home was wheelchair bound with an elderly spouse who had mobility issues, walked with a walker. And so, you know, those folks were not able to self-rescue. And so this is some of the things that were unfolding. Oh yeah, here's the bridge. So they asked, so if you knew this bridge at all, there's usually about 12 feet underneath this bridge of water before you get to water. And the trees were coming down and hitting that bridge as we were going over it, rocking that bridge. And so that's why we didn't want to leave them on this island. Like, hey, get on this. If we lose this bridge, you're going to be out on an island. Next slide. So we did the rescues in Londonderry. We backfilled. We brought the North Carolina team back up into Londonderry, and they asked us to get emergently to Barry, to the city of Barry. Think about the geography of Vermont. How do you get from Londonderry to Barry? So we went lights and sirens up the Route 7 corridor to Barry. By that time, the Otter Creek had overflowed at Danby Mount Tabor. We couldn't get up 7. So we had to go back roads to get up around that by the Otter Creek campground. When we got into Barry, they're like, you got to go to North Main Street in Barry. We've got teams that are down there that are on an island. They lost their prop on their boat. They hit a pallet. So they'd done a number of rescues. They lost the prop. They had one fin left on their prop. So they're stuck on one side. And so we went down and we operated from about 9 p.m. until 3 in the morning on the 10th, now until Tuesday, the 11th, doing rescues out of there. about 15 that happened with our two boats until we had both boats get into distress. We lost both boats downstream. High anxiety situation. One boat didn't lost its forward. It was only able to operate in reverse. And the other boat could not draft enough water to propel itself, and the water was too fast. And so we had them throw a rope out and they tied off to a home. We ended up calling in a loader. We built a 4-point harness system. Again, everything goes back to ropes. And I worked with the Barry City fire captain who was in their EOC. And we actually picked that boat up and ran it up the high ground in Barry and brought it back in so we could get it into swiftwater and deep water, and brought that back across, and we got those folks safely across about 2 a.m. The other boat, we ended up floating up the railroad tracks. Yes, up the railroad tracks. It was that deep, and brought it back in and carried it on. So this is us demobbing that night. And then you can imagine the fatigue level, right? This is when injuries start to happen and members just, and so we, about 3 a.m, they're like, okay. And that story goes a little bit beyond. They said, okay, you need to sleep in your trucks. We don't have any place for you. Essentially, we refused that, and I commandeered the local Berlin elementary school. I said, I know the fire department has keys to the school. We're not sleeping in trucks. These folks are exhausted. We opened up the elementary school's gymnasium. They had some gym mats out there, and they had a couple hours of sleep there. So at 5:30 in the morning, we were back on the road because we had a mudslide on Route 62. And so we had to go out and search all those cars with the dogs. We had received a 911 call the night before of a woman trapped in her home. And when we tried to get to her that night, it was so dangerous. The water was moving so fast on the Winooski that we couldn't get to her. She was in Berlin. And so we went out at first light to try to get to her. And this is where Connecticut comes in. We teamed up with Connecticut. The next slide shows that's her trailer out there at the center of the X. So where she's trapped in there. So this woman spent the night on her kitchen counter. That's how deep it was with her 2 cats. And so we worked with Connecticut State Police and the squad that I was working with Vermont. And next slide will show us. So we had to carry our boats down across land through this, and you say, well, it's just a ditch. Well, you can see they're up to their chest in water and just in that simple ditch. The next slide shows that we actually got those boats across. This railroad track was washed out just north of here. We got the motorized boat in, and we made contact with her. In the next slide, you'll see that we actually made that rescue. So this woman had been trapped in there for 20 hours or so, but she was still alive, and the state had kind of written her off because they didn't know if she was going to make it through. Next slide. And where it comes full circle is that gentleman here in the right here is a Williston firefighter, right? That Corey Hill. So there's 5 members currently that have dual roles from Williston Fire and the Urban Search and Rescue Team. And this is where that value comes in. That Corey is a person that we've invested in for both swiftwater, boat operation, and rope rescue. And he was part of that rescue to get that boat and get her out there. Next slide. This is a building fire that we went to as well while we were there. So this home was on fire. This is in downtown Montpelier. And because it was in the water, they sent us to this building fire as a swiftwater asset. We were actually quicker than any other mutual aid company because they had us deployed strategically, and were able to help the Montpelier Fire Department with that fire. Next slide. This is a area, this is a homeless encampment in Berlin, and the homeless encampment had been washed out, and with the transient population, it's very difficult to keep track of who's there and who's not there. And we had a missing person, and we had to search this. And one of the Massachusetts dogs hit on this this strainer, essentially with this beaver dam that has been formed from the flood water. Next slide. So where it comes full circle is the Massachusetts task force, right? These are the federal team. This is their latest and greatest. And they said, we've got to search that strainer. And they said, we need the rope rescue system. We got to set up this. So I showed you the first photo of us training back at the cache. I showed you the photo that said just in time training. So this is what we set up at 9 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night on July 11th to search that strainer. Vermont built this. Our members built this with the training that we had back here, where Massachusetts wasn't prepared to do it. And the next morning, the two folks in this boat said to me, and they came up to me and they gave me a hug with some tears in their eyes, and they said, we didn't know what your capability was, right? We've met them, we've done some training. So Chris Beal came up to me and he just held me and he said, your life, my life was in your hands and in your crew's hands. I had no idea what to expect. And you nailed it, right? Very little sleep. We get this thing done. We build this complex system and we allow this search to happen in the darkness with this very technical rope system. And he was just thankful, like that level of competency doesn't come without investing in our resources early on. Next slide. You can just skip through these next ones in the interest of time. This just shows some of the other aftermath of that. Later on, when we transitioned, we also have structural collapse capability. We worked, this is the Weston General Store, if you're familiar with that. When we went in there, when the state had initially analyzed this, they said, oh yeah, the building is fine. When we got in there, all of the foundation from the Weston store had been washed out, and the lolly columns that were holding the store up were no longer in touch with the beams. And they were occupying that. And so we, through the EOC, we called and said, you got to condemn the building. And so having that level of structural collapse understanding came full circle. We were able to shut that down and prevent anybody else from operating in there. This was, I take this photo of this bridge because we were asked to do a rescue on the, I don't remember what day, the 10th, maybe 10th or 11th. And what they asked us to cross this bridge, and the water was up to the edge of this and the trees were hitting that bridge. So you can see where the paints, this is on the downstream side, but on the upstream side, the trees were hitting this bridge so much that the entire bridge was flexing and we couldn't operate. I wouldn't engage the team to go across this bridge. It was too dangerous. So a team came in from the other side. And this is just a photo of us working with the local fire departments on the days and after. We were later staged. Next slide shows us in Springfield. So really we did the gamut, right? You saw, okay, we'll wrap it up here. The next slide should be the last slide. So over 220 people rescued by the Swiftwater rescue team. That's the initial report. And that doesn't come without, some bit of luck, honestly. Just humbling that Williston firefighters were able to be part of that, to be able to augment that. Luckily, we really went unscathed here in the town compared to some of these other communities that were hard hit. But that's how I think it comes full circle in the value of investing in technical rescue. The right people, the right equipment, and the right training. So thanks, Dave.
They're extraordinary stories and efforts, and really fascinating to hear about.
Yeah, no worries.
The skills and what you face. I don't know, I didn't realize the dramatic level of risk that people were going through during this event. So that's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that. Do we want to take time? I know we're a little over, but for just a couple questions. Or...
I wanted to ask if there's anything we can do. This is hard on you guys and your families. Is there anything that we can do to thank, the Wilson fire team that might be helpful, even if it's just a thank you card or something?
The note would mean so much. Yeah, I think that work goes a long way. We saw that at one point in the operation where a local family just brought in a note and some cookies and said, we know that. And it was really trying to convince our families back at home is like, my wife was sitting at home going, yeah, it rained, but our house was fine. But I'm like, you don't understand what we're seeing here. And it was hard to explain. Yeah, but I think the note goes a long way. For sure.
Well, one, I was going to suggest that perhaps our club could send some way of recognizing what y'all been done. It's really amazing. And it seems to me there's a hour TV show or something like that in there. But for the next one, and there will be a next one, of course, is there anything else that you would see doing to prepare for it over and above what we have now?
We're talking about that right now as this unfolds, about trying to get an after action review of what unfolded, because there was so much occurring at so many places across the state, is that we don't know each other's story. There was 13 of the initial teams, but then when we got the federal teams in, we don't know, like we all of that is recorded on a ICS 214 form, which is our documentation. But the true life stories is you'll just see, rescued 8 people rescued at this location. You won't see the lost the prop on the boat. Boats were disabled. And a lot of that stuff we did not push up through the command system because they were already taxed already. We didn't want to bring more anxiety to that group because we had disabled boats that were downstream. The people were safe, they were tied up. And it was this technical rescue mindset is, we'll get through it. Just how do we fix it? How do we get through it? And so we just worked with the resources that we had. But they're talking about now doing a formal after action, this debrief, to hear all the stories, hear the lessons learned, and try to prepare this. I mean, the state's still actively engaged in this landslide issue. There's 62 landslides that are ongoing right now in the state that they're monitoring with engineers, and that's coming out of the Urban Search and Rescue team as well. So they're kind of waiting for things to slow down a little bit, but they're talking about maybe using August to capture some of these stories and say, what can we do better next time? For sure.
Well, thank you so much.
I just want you to know, I'm sitting here thinking of the population as well as. And it's so small relatively. I came from Connecticut, so this is consider it small town. I'm just blown away with the experience that you people have. I can't even imagine the number of hours of training that you have. And I just want to thank you for being willing to spend more than your 40 hours of work to do this sort of thing. We are so incredibly lucky.
Yeah. Let me be clear that it's not me, it's them, right? It's the firefighters that show that initiative, to continue to have that passion, that say, yes, I want to take it to the next level, right? And then my job as the chief is to support that, right? It's not, that fire is there. If we can support that with, which Eric knows, we've invested in some more rescue systems here at the end of the year. We were able to bring that in here because they said, hey, here's the need. If we want to get to that mission, we want to get to that level of competency, we're going to need some extra tools. And so we keep working that hand in hand. So absolutely. I'll be sure that they hear it.
To Rotary back when you just come here.
Correct.
And I remember your background. And from the time you were a kid, you were interested in that. So I'm so glad that you take the kids on the fire engines and whatever, because maybe we'll find another one of you.
There you go. Thank you very much. That's humbling. Thank you.
So Ted, you want to explain how we'll?
So Chief, in as a way of thank you, the club will donate in your name donation to the Williston Central School Mentoring Program. So thank you very profoundly. Thank you for everything you do, and just stuff that we didn't even talk about today. So,
Yeah, no worries. No worries. Thank you all.
All right, Marty.
You got to pick the winner.
Oh, yes, I keep forgetting it.
Dan told me I had the winner.
All right. Chief Collette, we have one last thing to ask of you this
Okay.
morning. You need to draw our Rotary ticket. All right, the last 3 digits are 362.
I failed again. All right. Right. So that was spectacular. And I'm gonna start things off with $2 for our speaker. I usually give $1, but that was a special one. And I have a kind of a happy finding. Barbara and I had a lovely long weekend in New York City. And we got to meet our eldest grandson's girlfriend, who has been good for him. He's fixed up his hair a little bit, cut it off a little bit. She's much more articulate than he is, a lovely woman, lovely young woman. We'll see where this goes, who knows? And we saw a Broadway show. And on Monday, I did a little panel discussion on MSNBC. And as part of that, we Dawn Staley, who you may know is the famous South Carolina women's basketball coach, participates. We got to meet her. That was fun. And we also got a tour of the Saturday Night Live studio, which was fun. So it's a really nice weekend. I feel after all that stuff about the rescues, it feels kind of, I don't know, not quite right to talk about this fun weekend we had, but it was. So anyway, so I'm going to toss a few bucks in the pot this morning. Let's see, Susan, maybe we'll start with you.
Well, so if you want to throw in a few dollars for our speaker and for the other members of the Williston Fire Department, taking all the ways that they make our community safer very seriously, extensive training that they go through so they can face such a myriad of situations with the skills needed. Also, I'm forgetting what I was going to say. Oh, so in order to thank them, I wonder maybe each of us could write something and then bring it next week, and we can kind of compile it in some way. Maybe it's a scrapbook, maybe, I don't know, we can see what it looks like when it comes. And give them a big thank you and a recognition
Maybe a
from us.
basket of some cookies
Yeah.
and things like that would be nice.
Yeah, so we get the messages together and add some nice treats that the group would enjoy.
What we've done before for the school is we've actually gotten the names of all the people and everybody has written a specific note, a specific.
I like that.
Means more than like a community thing.
Mhm.
So if Eric or Ted or somebody can get a list of names from them, then we can each take a few names to write things.
Yeah, I like that idea.
I'll do Prescott. Thank you, Susan.
Yep.
It occurred to me, we're always complaining about taxes, but this is a great way to see your tax dollars at work. Good.
$5. $5 for the speaker, for the fire department. They talk about rescue. A number of years ago at 4 o'clock in the morning, I woke up with severe chest pain. We were just freaked out. We didn't know what to do. And Don called 911. They were crawling across my bed in 7 minutes. And they told him exactly what to do, stay on the phone, turn on the lights, whatever. So they do these huge rescues, and they also rescued me. And so we've had them 4 times to my house. But I'm still here. So anyway, that was really a great presentation. And I really am just blown away with the experience that these people have on their own initiative to be able to not just help us, but the whole state anyway. And then the $1 for the cool weather that we've had rather than the people that are having 30 days over 110. So yay, Vermont.
Yeah, you have some money there, I see.
A $1 thank you for the speaker, and a $1, you mentioned complaining about taxes, so I'm going to pay $1 in as a thank you to Eric Wells and Terry McCaig as the longtime chair of the select board for Williston having all this great service and the second lowest municipal property tax rate in Chittenden County. Thank you very much.
Right. Let's see, who do I see? Terry.
A dollar certainly for the great fire department that we have and other public service that we have in town. I was fortunate to have my older son and daughter-in-law with me for 2 weeks before and after the 4th of July, and we all enjoyed the parade and the hot dogs from the Boy Scouts. And I'll contribute all of my winnings from the Mega Millions. I won $2, so I'll total of 5.
Yeah, we didn't win that one either. I'm sorry.
Just because.
Chris.
Thanks to the speaker. It was awesome. Thanks to Ted for bringing him in. Let's see.
So it seems a little silly to give $1 for baseball after that presentation, so I'll give all my money for the
And
presentation.
I'm glad you didn't mention baseball.
Yeah, no. And sometime along, I'll tell you all a silly story about how I interacted with them and how they rescued me one time.
Back then.
Well, $1 for thanks that I haven't had to be extracted from a vehicle or saved from a flood, honestly, because you see those and you realize, there, but for the grace of God. And then $1 for our speaker, of course, in the heroic fire department, and $1 for Ted for inviting our speaker today. Thank you.
I missed it. Right, Dan.
I've got $1 for the speaker, of course, that was incredibly powerful, especially with the images and everything that doesn't get mentioned that he did. So yeah, that was awesome. Thanks, Ted. I have $1 for Terry. She's not here right now, but doing a really good job organizing a fair fundraiser. And you mentioned $1 for the cooler, nicer weather that we have been having. Very thankful for that.
Phil, I don't know if that's money you wanted to give me or not.
Yep. I like to recognize the excellent presentation of the speaker and to say how grateful I am to live in a community where the community supports its support system to the extent that Williston does. It's an amazing, this community has stood up for its education, it stood up for its fire department, it stood up for its police department in a way that most communities don't. And I think it's just a wonderful position to be in, to be able to have the comfort that we know our support system is there and it stands behind us. So thank you to all of these people who dedicated themselves to supporting our community.
Well said. Right. Oh, here's Terry.
Oh, great. It's been a great week. Not sure if I'll be here next week because I'm headed to Prague, but the fair thing is going to be happening, and that's all. Good week. Survived. Just a few bucks.
Right. Did I miss anyone? I don't know if there's anyone still.
There's 2 people.
Oh, anyone on the Zoom screen that?
No.
Thank you very much.
Give it to the
Slam dunk. Yeah, question. Watch out for the wire.
Valley still set the ones that are not even, you know,
Done. I will make that. Thank you.
I got, yeah. I have, I am going to